We have Mr. Moyer with us, Mr. John Moyer. And back in 1953, I don't know, some of you may not even remember this.
According to my information, it's been here about 20 years in the custody of the B&O Museum.
But Trains magazine ran this article in the August issue, and it was about a runaway train into Union Station.
This was the one that went through the station floor. That is the real treasure of GG1s, to have that one.
Mr. Moyer was a fireman on that particular train, and we're going to talk to Mr. Moyer now about his experiences on the Federal Express that particular day when it ran into Union Station.
Well, we signed up in New York about 1 a.m. in the morning, and that train left New York Station at, I think, 3:02. And there was nothing unusual up to that point. We was out on the X tracks, and when the New Haven engine left, we backed in and coupled to the train and proceeded with the regular brake test.
I came down, I contacted David Shackelford here, who's the curator, and told him I'd like to look at this thing. And he was very gracious and invited me down and told me that they just are in a funding crunch. They have no immediate plans to restore this. The collapse of their roof under the weight of the snow a couple of years ago really ate up all their disposable income that they had for additional projects. So he said, if your city would like to have this, he said we could be helping each other here. That was the beginning of what got us interested in coming down here and trying to investigate the possibilities of moving this thing to York.
And everything was normal the whole way down to Baltimore. There's really nothing distinguished between any other run. And when we left Baltimore Station, we went right up through the tunnel, and we went over the B&P, and at that way he ran the B&P, he never put the brake on. Well, he was shut off before the hill and let it drift down the hill and pull on it way up, so he never broke. And we never used a brake again until we got that Bladenburg Road, and we got the approach signal for Bladenburg Road, and Harry put the brakes on. And I didn't notice anything unusual, although I didn't hear the exhaust. He said, I can't hold them, and he put the train in emergency, and there was really no exhaust there. So I have an emergency valve above me in that side of the cab, so I told Harry, well, I'll stop her, and so I grabbed the emergency valve, and it just fell down. Usually you have to pull it down with the pressure of air in there, but there's no air, so it just fell down, and at that time, we knew we had no brakes.
To push it down, it normally requires a lot of strength. That's why it's in this position, so you can get on your foot on it if you have to. But in this case, he hit that thing, and it just fell right to the floor because there was no air in the line at all. So that was a very bad sign. Very bad sign. The interior, then, what we will do is we will power wash the entire inside repeatedly with detergent to get all the scale off that we can. Then hopefully we'll get some volunteers in here to do some chipping and painting. Even though the plan tentatively in York is to only have access, or visibility rather, for one end of it to be restored. At the parts, it could be an ongoing project to restore the interior of both ends. But this will become mostly storage, meeting room, volunteers room, bulletin boards. Maybe we'll put a video loop in here with some history in it. But typically they refer to this as the ballroom in a GG1. Once that it's had the transformers removed, which has to be done by law, then this becomes an area for the restorers to have their paraphernalia. We are searching for someone who worked for the railroad who knows air systems. Now, I trained as an operator once, and I had to go to air brake class. But we need somebody who's actually an air brake mechanic. Someone who can alter the system, because what has happened here is that the bums stripped every piece of copper or brass that was exposed in here. So, in so doing, they destroyed the airline system, which is a very complex system. Now what we can do is we can rig this to have an air brake system in it using the existing reservoirs to operate just like a piece of rolling stock so that we could move it on the railroad. If we did that, we're looking at a very minimal moving fee, but we don't have a volunteer who can rebuild that line and obtain the seals and stuff that might have to be put in for an inspection. So the alternative is to have this thing moved on a large lowboy flat car.
So this time now we're approaching New York Avenue, and that's a 30-mile curve into Washington Terminal. And we were doing approximately maybe 40, 45, maybe 50. And we turned that corner. It wasn't bad at all. The only difference in this run and any other run, usually when we come down to New York Avenue, we have a stop signal. And they were backing out a Southern train when we were on time. And they were backing it out going into the yard. But us being late, that train had already passed, so we had a clear shot in. Or it might have been a different story too, right there at New York Avenue. Harry tried to, he reversed the engines. It's the only thing left for him, but it didn't matter. The overloads kicked them out right away, so it just a matter of a little jolt, and that was gone. We started blowing the horn all the way down, and that saved a lot of people, because usually they're out there in a concourse waiting for the train to come in. The station master's office is right next to Sea Tower, and they cleared out as fast as they could. I sat down against the bulkhead facing the rear of the train, and Harry was still on the seat, and when we hit the bumping block, we knocked that about 50 foot in the air, and it made a big hole in the concourse roof and come down. Of course, I didn't see that till after we got out. And it was a few bumps, and we going on, I don't remember that much, except we started to sink. And as the floor gave way, the rear end of the engine went down, and the first car held to that first car. And that slowed the train down enough that going in that way that we didn't get too much damage. I don't know if I'd be here or not if we went down with the nose front instead of the back. But it stopped the train, and being in track 16, the car stayed on the track, and the people on the rear end of the train never knew we wrecked. They thought it was a rough stop. Which once in a while somebody hits a bumping block down there, and it is a rough stop. But we only had 7 major injuries. And I think broken hip was the worst injury we had. There was a lot of smaller injuries. And I had a little nick, and that's about it. But we shook the dust out of that station. I don't know when it was built, but it was about like an inch deep of dust on the remaining concourse floor.